swallowed whole by a python, leaving for work and never coming home, relying on your friends and colleagues to breathe for you as paralysis consumes you, and documenting your final moments of life, knowing that in a few hours, you will be dead. These are some of the most horrific snake attacks of all time.
Hit like and subscribe. This is Fierce.
The shocking and tragic story of Akbar Salubiro, a 25-year-old man from Sulawesi, Indonesia, captured the world's attention in 2017 when he went missing during his routine work on a palm oil plantation. What started as a regular day of work would end in a devastating discovery that would haunt the community for years to come. Akbar was a hard-working young man living in a small village near Mamuju in Sulawesi. The island is home to a diverse range of animals, but it's also a place where much of the rainforests and mangroves have been cleared to make way for agriculture. This has put extra pressure on the fragile ecosystem and the animals that live within it. Akbar worked on one of the many palm oil plantations that dominate the region, spending long hours harvesting the palm fruit to process for oil. On Friday, March 24, 2017, after completing his morning prayer, Akbar set off his day at the plantation. He worked diligently all year round, harvesting about 300 trees each day from a stretch of 100 hectares. His tasks were demanding, pruning the palm branches, cutting the fruit, and loading it into trucks. As the sun set on that fateful Friday, Akbar stayed behind to complete his 300th tree of the day. His colleagues left for the evening, leaving him to finish his work. As he worked quietly, the dense vegetation around him hid a silent but deadly threat. It was an ambush predator, an enormous reticulated python. It had sensed Akbar from a distance away and had moved closer, hidden by the long grass and vegetation. It waited for the opportune moment. He had no idea the danger he was in. He severed a bunch of fruit from the tree with his long sickle and bent down to pick it up from the ground. And that's when he felt it, the sudden and intense strike from the snake. It dug its teeth into his flesh, and before Akbar could fend it off, it wrapped its coils around him with lightning speed. Akbar suddenly found himself unable to move. He felt the power from the snake's muscular body as it squeezed him tighter and tighter. Akbar went limp. He had succumbed to the python's inescapable grasp. With the prey subdued, the snake could now consume him at its leisure. The python began to swallow Akbar whole. Akbar's terrifying and tortuous death went unnoticed at first. His wife was away and only grew concerned when she returned on the Sunday. Nobody in the village had seen Akbar since he left for work on the Friday morning. When his wife spoke with his co-workers on Monday morning, they recalled hearing cries coming from the plantation. At the time, they thought they were just sounds of kids playing or other workers calling to one another. Now, realizing that these could have been Akbar's final cries for help, they decided to launch a search. Among the long grass, they discovered a 23-foot-long reticulated python. The snake was sluggish and bloated, unable to move. They noticed a particularly engorged stomach and they decided to investigate. The villagers killed the snake and began to pull its massive body from the brush. With a large knife, one of the men carefully sliced open the python's belly, and what they found inside was horrifying. As the snake's body opened up, the first thing they saw was a boot still attached to a foot. As they continued to cut, Akbar's body, still intact and wearing his clothes, spilled out from the belly of a giant snake. It left the villagers in shock and disbelief. It was clear that Akbar had been attacked from behind, as he had an injury likely caused by the snake's sharp teeth on his back. Despite the shocking and gruesome incident, sadly Akbar's death was not an isolated incident. The following year, on the evening of June 14, 2018, 54-year-old Watiba stepped out of her house to check on her garden. The rainy season had recently ended on Muna Island, located off the southern coast of Indonesia's Sulawesi. Everything was lush and green, but Watiba was having trouble with her vegetable garden. She worked tirelessly to feed her family and to sell her produce at the local market. But she found that in the coolness of the evening, wild boar would venture out from the nearby forest and root around in her vegetable patch. They would tear up the crops and fruits, destroying her family's food and her hard work. Each evening she walked half a mile from the village to her garden to scare the animals away. But wild boar attract another animal. They are prime prey for reticulated pythons, and the 3 wild boar that were pulling up the crops in Watiba's garden that evening were being stalked by one of these huge snakes. Watiba bent over to push some of the vegetables back into the soil. A 23-foot python launched a surprise attack. It bit her from behind, knocking her forward. In the ensuing chaos, her machete fell to the ground. Before she could react, the python coiled around her, its powerful muscles constricting her body. She was powerless to stop the muscular serpent. The following morning, when Watiba had not returned home, her family alerted the village. A search party of more than 100 people retraced her steps to the garden. There, lying on the ground, were her flashlight and sandals, but no other trace of her could be found. Then one of the villagers let out a cry. About 30 meters away, they discovered an extremely bloated python. Suspecting the worst, they killed the snake by chopping off its head. They carried it back to the village to open it up. One of the villagers took a knife and ran the blade along the length of the snake. Watiba's undigested body flopped out of the snake's belly. Still fully clothed, the woman who meant so much to so many in the community lay limp and lifeless at their feet. Her death sent shockwaves through her community. As a devoted mother of 2, her loss was deeply felt by all who knew her. The incident highlighted the delicate balance between human activity and wildlife habitats. As the python's habitat is rapidly eroded away by deforestation and agricultural expansion, they are having to travel further and further to find their prey. Unfortunately, on this night, the python came across Watiba. But it's not just pythons that cost humans their lives. In the next 2 stories, snake experts battle death after being bitten by venomous snakes. In 2001, herpetologist and scientific explorer Joe Sloinsky was at the helm of a research expedition deep in the jungles of Myanmar. No stranger to the demanding conditions of Southeast Asia, Joe was well versed in the physical and logistical challenges that came with fieldwork in such remote, rain-soaked terrain. Despite the relentless downpours and arduous treks that stretched on for weeks, he remained focused and unwavering. Over the course of his distinguished career, Joe had identified 18 previously unknown species of reptiles and amphibians. Driven by a deep passion for conservation and discovery, Joe was committed to documenting the extraordinary biodiversity found across Myanmar, Laos, and China. But this final expedition would come at a huge cost. Joe was accompanied by 10 fellow scientists and aided by numerous local porters. One of the scientists also happened to be his best friend. On September 11, 2001, whilst the world was reeling from the shocking attacks on America, Joe was about to face his own battle. One of his Burmese field assistants, Tun Win, approached him with a snake he had caught the day before, claiming to have been bitten by it without suffering any ill effects. Assuming the snake was harmless, as Tun Win was still very much alive, Joe reached into the bag without hesitation and pulled the snake out. But he had made a terrible mistake. As he pulled out the pencil-thin, gray-banded snake, he jumped. "That's a crate!" he exclaimed as the snake lunged forwards and struck him on the hand. Joe knew that this was one of the most lethal snakes in Asia. There was no anti-venom, and paralysis set in within a matter of hours. He inspected his hand closely and breathed a sigh of relief. He sat up and called the team over. They stood around him. Joe spoke calmly and clearly. All his years of expertise meant that he knew exactly what would happen to him over the next several hours, and he knew that there was a slim chance he could make it. But given the right help and support from his team, it was definitely a chance he felt was achievable. He explained to his team that the venom was already coursing through his body. It was already taking hold of his vital organs. It was only a matter of time before paralysis would kick in and he would struggle to breathe. But if his team breathed for him, then in around 10 hours his body would break down the venom in his system and he would be okay. But it was tough going and Joe began to deteriorate further. He didn't think his plan was working and realized that he needed to be medivaxed and put on life support in a hospital. At one point, 2 women on the team who had been artificially breathing for Joe for some time asked for a break. Joe wiggled his big toe in protest, showing that he preferred to have the ladies doing the breathing for him. Even in his dying moments, Joe had a sense of humor. But that was about to come to an end. It had been 12 hours since he had been bitten, and his team had been keeping him alive the whole time. When giving the initial briefing on his condition, Joe had estimated that they would need to keep him alive for 48 hours before his body would overcome the toxic effects of the venom. At 12:25 p.m. the following day, 17 hours after the bite, the team could no longer feel a pulse. They performed CPR on him. For 3 hours, they pressed on Joe's chest and breathed for him, but by now, all hope was lost, and Joe died surrounded by his team in the middle of the Myanmar jungle. An air evacuation came the following day, just one day too late. Joe Sloinsky died doing what he loved, surrounded by the people who admired and respected him most. His dedication to science, his passion for discovery, and his unshakable resolve left a mark that would never be forgotten. He was a pioneer, a protector of nature, and a man who gave everything, even his life, in the pursuit of knowledge. His legacy lives on through the species he discovered, the researchers he inspired, and the wilderness he fought to understand. Joe Sloinsky wasn't the only herpetologist to understand the complex effects of snake venom on the human as it was taking hold of his own body. Back in 1957, P Schmidt was working in the Chicago Natural History Museum when someone came in with a snake. Carl was a renowned snake expert and had several species named after him. When he was handed the snake, secure in a tank, Carl marveled at the beautiful green coloration of its skin. He noted very quickly that it looked like the deadly African snake, the boomslang. But there was something different about it. The anal plate was undivided, unlike in a boomslang. Curious about what species this could be, Carl picked the snake up for a closer look, and that's when it struck him. At this point, Carl didn't know whether it was a boomslang or not, but he was about to find out. But remarkably, rather than head to the nearest hospital, Carl, the dedicated scientist, instead documented his symptoms. Perhaps he realized all too late that the snake was a boomslang after all and knew that antivenom was only available in Africa and was resigned to the fact he would die. Or maybe he believed that this was a different species and wanted to understand the potency of the venom. He left his office and made his way home on the train. He was beginning to feel the full effects of the venom. But Carl saw this as a scientific opportunity. He must have been feeling terrible as he would be dead in just a few short hours, but still he recorded his symptoms in his journal. He called his wife at lunchtime after he had vomited at around 1:30 p.m. He was urged to seek medical attention but responded with, "No, that would upset the symptoms." He was now bleeding internally from his heart, lungs, kidney, and brain. Even his eyes were bleeding. He was a shocking sight when his wife hurried to help him. He was covered in sweat and unresponsive. He was rushed to hospital where they tried to resuscitate him, but he died at 3 p.m. from respirational paralysis. While some snake bites can be avoided, some are simply a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. As wildlife and humans inevitably interact, when it comes to snakes, some of those interactions prove deadly.